This is the second part of the 3.12 video, and we were in the midst of reading about D-Day, and now we're going to look at this historical close-up, discovering the unthinkable, the Holocaust. As Allied troops liberated German-occupied territories and began to push into Germany itself, they discovered a horror that defied imagination. The advancing soldiers came across prison camps with men, women, and children so thin and sick they looked like skeletons. In some places, the Allied found thousands of corpses littering the muddy ground or piled into giant pits. For years, the Allies had heard reports that Nazis were arresting Jews, Slavs, communists, people with physical or mental disabilities, and others they considered inferior. But few people outside of German occupied areas could imagine or were willing to recognize the terrible crimes that Hitler's regime was committing. The hysterical exaggeration of World War I propaganda made many Americans skeptical about the horrifying reports of German atrocities. But now, as the Allies pushed towards Berlin, they discovered the full scope of the Nazi campaign of carefully planned mass murder known as the Holocaust. A holocaust is a complete destruction, especially by fire. The term the Holocaust refers to the mass slaughter of Europe's Jewish population and others by the Nazis. As the German army drove into Soviet Union and other countries, specially trained death squads murdered perhaps 1 million Jews and others that Hitler viewed as troublemakers or as inferior. But Hitler was determined to reach, as he put it, the final solution to the Jewish question, the killing of all the Jews in Europe. To this end, he devised a more systematic way to commit genocide, the deliberate and methodical destruction of a people. He turned to his growing network of prison camps called concentration camps, which he set up soon after coming to power. The first of these concentration camps was built in 1933 near the town of Dachau. The following years, Hitler ordered more concentration camps built throughout Germany and in countries the Nazis conquered. As the Nazi armies marched across Europe, they forced thousands into trains which hauled the captives like cattle to concentration camps. In the camps, many prisoners became slave laborers and were forced to mine coal or work at factories that made guns, airplanes, cement, fuel, or other products needed for the war. Many died of overwork, starvation, or disease. By late 1942, the Nazis had constructed 6 specialized death camps in German-occupied Poland. The most notorious of the death camps was at Auschwitz, in southern Poland. At Auschwitz, trains pulled straight into the camp so the prisoners, mostly Jews, could be quickly unloaded and sorted. Guards immediately divided new arrivals into 2 groups, those capable of slave labor and those not. Those designated unfit for work, including the sick, the elderly, pregnant women, and children under 16, were herded into underground chambers where the prisoners were told they would shower, but the shower rooms were actually poison gas chambers. Jews and other undesirables from Italy, Austria, Greece, and Hungary were transported to Auschwitz. Bleh. Before the war's end, an estimated 2 million people were murdered at Auschwitz alone. In all, the Holocaust claimed the lives of perhaps 11 million people, including almost 6 million Jews, 2/3 of the Jewish population in Europe. Okay, and we're going to stop there and go back to the lesson. Making progress in Europe. From the start of World War II in September 1939, the Axis powers were on the offensive. The Japanese were expanding their empire in the Pacific. The German Army and Air Force had quickly defeated most of Europe and threatened Britain and the Soviet Union. Italy and Germany were in North Africa. By the end of 1942, the United States now fully in the war, the tide began to turn against the Axis powers. Okay, let's go to the activity from Normandy to Berlin. Oh, and be sure that you've gone and checked your reading guide. Check it against the lesson answer key if you haven't done so already. From Normandy to Berlin. During World War II, U.S. Army Signal Corps photographers documented every major military campaign in the European theater of operations. They took part in the landings in North Africa, Italy, and Normandy. They took millions of feet of combat film and captured hundreds of thousands of still images. Imagine you are a U.S. Army Signal Corps photographer during World War II. You have been assigned to travel with Allied forces as they begin their liberation of Western Europe in June 1944. If you have your camera and film, it's time to go. D-Day. By January 1944, the Allied powers were nearly ready to focus their attention on launching an invasion in Western Europe from England. The plan was to move a great number of men and machinery across the English Channel and liberate Western Europe. During World War II, the term D-Day was used by military planners to designate any secret date for a military campaign. Who organized the most famous D-Day in history? Dwight Eisenhower, and that is a picture of him right here, the man in the full dark suit. That's Dwight Eisenhower, the Allied command leader. D-Day. One decision Eisenhower had to make was where in France the invasion would come ashore. Allied commanders fooled the Germans into thinking they would land farther north than the intended target. So here we are, Great Britain. There's the English Channel between Great Britain and France, and they had to decide where they were going to land. And there's Normandy with that fireball there. But they thought they tricked them to thinking they were going to land in Calais there, more farther north. Where did the Allied troops, mostly British, American, and Canadian, land? Normandy. Most people thought the invasion would take place in Calais, where the English Channel is narrowest. Eisenhower managed to fool the Germans by placing a number of men, inflatable tanks, and fake landing craft across the English Channel from Calais. He also sent misleading radio messages over the airwaves. Here's the photograph he took during the D-Day invasion of Normandy. Give it a title and write a caption. And you can just, do that or not. The Allies move east. By the end of the day, on June 6th, 156,000 troops had come ashore in Normandy and all 5 landing sites had been secured. During the next 3 weeks, the Allies landed more than 1 million men, nearly 200,000 vehicles, and 600,000 tons of supplies. Miles after mile, they fought their way inland, moving east. On August 25th, Allied troops liberated what city? Paris, the capital of France. As Allied troops advanced toward Paris, Hitler ordered his generals to burn the French capital to the ground. Fortunately, the generals hesitated and Allied soldiers liberated the city, cheered on by grateful Parisians. Here is a photograph he took during the liberation of Paris. That is important to remember. France was conquered almost on the outset of World War II. So France really did not play a role in the World War II because they were occupied by Germany. It was very much Great Britain standing alone with the United States as their ally. Hitler's desperate offensive. Throughout the summer and fall of 1944 and into the winter, the Allies closed in on Germany. The Soviets approached from the east and the British, Americans, and other forces from the west. Germans were now fighting to defend the fatherland. In December 1944, Hitler made a desperate attempt to turn back the oncoming tide of Allied troops. See, so you have the Soviets coming in here from the east. You have the Allied powers coming in from the west, trying to squeeze them in. What battle that took place near the Belgian, German, and French borders temporarily stopped the Allied advance into Germany? And we see here on the map, Battle of the Bulge. And that is correct. Hitler's desperate offensive. The Battle of the Bulge took the lives of 19,000 American GIs, and the American line bent but did not break. After 2 weeks of intense fighting, the Allies managed to rally and halt the German attack. Soon they were pushing forward again, smashing through German defenses. Here's a photograph he took during the Battle of the Bulge. Give it a caption and a title. Bombing Germany. In an effort to destroy Germany's war-producing industries and to wreak havoc on the morale of German citizens, the Allies conducted bombing missions against the German industrial and commercial centers. The Allies bombed several German cities without regard for the loss of civilian life. What German cities were bombed? And if we look at where the bomb sites are, we see Cologne, Berlin, Dresden. So Dresden, Berlin, and Cologne. Correct. Allied bombs fell on Dresden, Berlin, and Cologne and several other German cities, reducing block after block to rubble. The bombing of Dresden resulted in a firestorm that killed tens of thousands of civilians. Here's a photograph he took after the bombing of Dresden. Caption and title. Discovering the unthinkable. As Allied troops liberated German-occupied territories and began to push into Germany itself, they discovered a horror that defied imagination. The advancing soldiers came across prison camps with men, women, and children so thin and sick they looked like skeletons. The Allies had found the Nazi concentration camps. Which two were concentration camps the Allied troops liberated as they marched eastward across Germany? And it's Buchenwald right here and Auschwitz. There we go. Check. Oh, try again. As they march eastward across Germany. Dachau and Auschwitz, maybe? Oh boy. Buchenwald and Dachau. Try that one. Okay. My mistake. Hitler was determined to reach a final solution to the Jewish question. He hated the Jews and wanted to kill all the Jews in Europe. The concentration camps were parts of the Nazi plan to commit genocide. Here's the photograph he took as the American troops discover and enter Buchenwald. And you can see skeletons just lined up in their barracks. By the spring of 1945, Americans advancing from the west and Soviets fighting from the east finally met at the Elbe River. The end of the war finally came after the Soviet troops closed in and captured this German city on April 30th, 1945. The official German surrender came 7 days later on May 7th. And what city was this? It is indeed Berlin, right there on the map. At 2:25 p.m. on April 30th, 1945, two Red Army sergeants waved the Soviet flag from a second-story window of the Reichstag. An hour later, Hitler committed suicide. You were allowed to accompany Soviet troops into Berlin. Here's a photograph you took after Berlin was captured. And you can see Berlin decimated, the planes entering, tanks, scene of destruction. And if we hit view, it just shows all the pictures that we've taken throughout that photographic journey. And it says here, if you would like, take a moment to reflect on your experience, what you've seen, and how it has affected you. In your history journal, write a paragraph that describes your feelings about what you have seen. Remember, that's not required. You don't have to submit the history journals, but you can certainly do that for your own reflection. Now, at the end, do not forget to complete the 3.12 checkpoint. Good luck, and we'll see you at the next video.